You know, there are world leaders, and then there are absolute legends who just completely rewrite the rulebook on what it means to hold power. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're slowing things down to take a deep, thoughtful look into the genuinely unbelievable life of José Pepe Mujica. He actually just passed away in 2025 at the age of 89, leaving behind this massive legacy that kind of challenges, well, everything modern society tells us about success, about wealth, and about authority. So, let's dive right in. I want you to ask yourself, who was the world's poorest president? I mean, it's a title the media gave him, though to be fair, he'd probably tell you differently. But think about it. While other heads of state were living it up in opulent palaces surrounded by heavily armed guards, Mujica, he literally said no thanks to the Uruguayan presidential mansion. Instead, he chose to stay right where he'd always been, out on his humble little flower farm, driving himself around in this vintage, beat-up blue Volkswagen Beetle.
90%. Let that sink in for a second. 90%. That staggering number represents the exact chunk of his presidential salary that he donated directly to charities and social causes. And he did this every single month. Now, he wasn't actually impoverished, right? He owned his farm. But this extreme generosity, this absolute unbreakable commitment to living simply, it proved that his lifestyle wasn't just some clever political stunt. It was just who he was.
But you know, to truly understand the man, we really have to look into the darker shadows of his past. Back in the 1960s, driven by this deep outrage over growing inequality, he actually helped found an urban guerrilla movement called the Tupamaros. And things got dark. By 1973, under a brutal military dictatorship, he was captured. For nearly 14 agonizing years, he endured unimaginable torture and solitary confinement. He spent years in severe psychological isolation. He actually later said that he survived the ordeal just by reflecting deeply on life and, incredibly, by talking to the insects in his cell. Now, when you survive a psychological crucible like that, I mean, it would be so easy to emerge just completely consumed by hatred. But Mujica, he chose a totally different path: forgiveness over revenge. When he was finally released in 1985 under a democratic amnesty, it became clear that the absolute torment of prison had forged this profoundly new philosophy within him. He completely abandoned armed resistance and hatred and decided to dedicate the rest of his life to democratic reconciliation. So step by step, he starts climbing the democratic ladder through Uruguay's Broad Front coalition. First, he becomes a member of parliament, then Minister of Agriculture, and finally, the 40th president of Uruguay in 2009. And the thing is, his plain-spoken nature and the fact that he completely refused a massive security entourage, it just made him deeply, deeply beloved. He was incredibly accessible, literally a world leader who was genuinely just a farmer, just one of the people. And the sheer scale of his presidential achievements between 2010 and 2015, honestly, it's pretty remarkable. His administration actually made Uruguay the very first nation to fully legalize and regulate recreational cannabis. It was a really bold move specifically aimed at crippling organized crime, but they didn't stop there. They passed marriage equality, they expanded reproductive rights. He spearheaded this massive, globally recognized transition to clean, renewable energy. And he did all of this while heavily expanding affordable housing for lower-income families. Of course, any impactful leadership invites its fair share of debate, right? That's just political reality. Critics frequently pointed to his violent guerrilla past, seriously questioning his history. Others argued that his social reforms just moved way too fast, or they pointed to economic challenges that hadn't fully been resolved. Yet, on the flip side, supporters noted that his administration oversaw steady economic growth, a real decline in poverty, and, well, maintained his unwavering belief that politics literally exists to serve the ordinary person. Real wealth is measured by freedom rather than possessions. Just take a moment to let that sink in. When he eventually left the presidency and went right back to his farm, he really became this global moral voice. He constantly taught that excessive consumerism just doesn't create happiness. He deeply believed that whenever you buy something, you aren't actually paying with money. You're paying with the hours of your life that you had to spend to earn that money. Our time, he argued, that is our true currency. Which brings us to the end of our explainer today. And honestly, it leaves us with a pretty lingering, provocative question. How will you spend your time to build true wealth? I mean, José Mujica went from a revolutionary to a prisoner in solitary confinement to a humble farmer president who essentially challenged the conscience of the entire world. So as you step away from this explainer, really think about his definition of happiness. Thank you so much for taking this quiet, focused time to learn with me today. Until next time, take care of your time.